Yes, sir. Good evening,
Just
sir.
open. Good evening. She is Deepika. She is my student of BPT. She is my student of
Good evening,
BPT,
sir.
Bachelor in Field Therapy. She is the anchor of this program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sir.
Are we waiting
Okay,
for
sir.
more people, or are you just recording this?
Yeah. We'll tell you, sir, when to go start.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Around 800 registration is there. 800 people has registered. 800.
Wow.
So they will be on YouTube. We'll just share with this link with the YouTube. So we only 5 people will be there with you,
Okay.
and the participant will be on YouTube live. YouTube.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So how many cases are there in, sir, per day? How many cases in your country?
Oh, it depends on.
Death rate is very high in your country. Okay.
I honestly, I haven't. I'd have to go back and look across the country how much we have in the place in the state I live in. We're probably about 1,000 a day, so we're probably somewhere in the 30,000 plus a day, depending on. But we've also had 180,000 deaths related to it. Just kind of the nature of our current political system. So
yeah, India is progressing day by day. 75,000, but recovery rate is good for India. It is 76% recovery rate, and death rate is 1.8%.
Okay.
Yeah, it is 1.8% death rate with the corona.
That's still pretty high.
Yeah, 1.8. Out of we are till today we are having around 34 lakh cases. 34 lakh till today, in which we have cured 26 lakh people are cured. 7 lakhs are remaining, and around 64,000 have died.
Yeah, we're about to start our universities up again, and a couple have already closed down due to too many cases. And where I work, we're starting in a week, and we'll see what happens. We have no idea what it's going to look like.
Yes, sir. So we Deepika.
Yes, sir.
Deepika, now sir will start. Now शुभम कुशवाहा ने कुछ बोला क्या? Start करें? पूछ लो सेवन.
Yes, sir.
We'll start. Make it live. Live. Okay, done.
Yes, sir.
Okay, start. Deepika, start.
Okay. So a very warm welcome and good evening to everyone who are present here. Welcome to Physio Webinar Club YouTube channel. I am your host Deepika Sharma. Welcome you all to the webinar on the topic Continuity of Care, Sports Medicine to Sports Performance, hosted by the Physio Webinar Club. Now proceeding further, it's really a privilege and honor for me to introduce and to welcome Mr. Joel Luedke, resource person for today's webinar on the behalf of Physio Webinar Club. Sir has completed his bachelor education in kinesiology, athletic training from University of Wisconsin, Madison in 2008. He has completed his Master of Science Education in Exercise Science in 2011 at University of Kansas. Sir is currently pursuing doctorate in sports leadership and administration at Concordia University, Chicago. Besides this, Sir is also a certified sports nutritionist, certified in dry needling basics 1 and 2, certified in dynamic neuromuscular stabilization DNS exercise 1 and 2, certified in impact trained athletic training ITAT, and besides this, he has also been certified in many other courses. Besides this, in field of athletic training experience, Sir has given his service as a medical coverage for high school football game at Orthokansas, PA in 2010 to 2011. In June 2009 to 2011, he worked at University of Kansas as an assistant athletic trainer. Sir has also worked as an athletic training fellow at University of Wisconsin, La Crosse in August 2011 to March 2012. Sir has also worked as Oklahoma State University as an assistant athletic trainer in March 2012 to June 2014. In July 2014, Sir has been appointed as Director of Athletic Training and Sports Performance at University of Wisconsin La Crosse and is currently working as a Assistant Athletic Director of Athletic Training and Sports Performance at University of Wisconsin La Crosse. Now, Sir will take the session from here on the topic Continuity of Care, Sports Medicine to Sports Performance. I hope that all the participants are going to have a wonderful session today. Now over to you, Sir.
Thank you very much. We'll get everything shared here. All right. Well, thank you first off for having me. I appreciate the offer. I'm glad we got the timing to work out. Just to double check, everybody can see the screen okay? And see the slides? We'll try this. There, I think that should be doing what I want it to do.
Yeah, sir, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity. So really what I'm hoping to kind of talk about in this one, in this continuity of care, sports medicine to sports performance, is give a little bit of a background of how things are done in the U.S., especially in the university athletics setting. This kind of blossoms into the professional leagues, sometimes down even to our high school level activities, but really just the importance and the utility of being able to work as a collaborative team from the sports medicine side, but also with the sports performance side, and how that can have the direct impact on our student athletes in our case, or any athletes that you're working with. So just a quick overview, just a background of what athletic training and strength and conditioning / sports medicine and performance looks like in our model. Changes in approach that we've made over the course of the last several years, bridging the gap. We'll get into a little bit of that. Just the idea of being able to get these two professions to communicate together and work together. The important role of the sports performance coach, and then how important collaboration is in the ultimate goal of getting an athlete back to what they're trying to accomplish. So just a little addendum on top of the introduction. Thank you for that, by the way. So really, when it comes to university athletics, I've been all over the place in terms of what my experience is. So I've worked at the highest level, which was at the University of Wisconsin and the University of Kansas and Oklahoma State University. When you see anything from the U.S. when it comes to college sports, those are the highest levels. And so I've gotten an opportunity to work with them. I was fortunate enough to be part of a national championship cross country team, and several of the athletes I worked with there went on to and continuing to run professionally, and also have made Olympic appearances. So it's been fun to work with that level of athlete. Currently, I'm at a smaller institution, not as high level of athletics, but still very good, very competitive. So it's been fun to work with them as well. This picture is actually of one of me working last year, doing the emergency care portion of my job. Along with that, I am a podcast host. I host Clinically Pressed podcast, which is everything's around medicine, wellness, fitness, nutrition. And then just recently, we started up an athletic training chat podcast, which is specifically highlighting professionals in our profession of athletic training. Along with those, I've had the fortunate time to actually come to India twice in my career with Mueller Sports Medicine to run some taping workshops. And I've also been able to go to Sri Lanka, Singapore, and Malaysia. So I've gotten a little bit of international travel there as well. So just a couple definitions. Athletic trainer. This is something that in the US, it's a little different on how our setup is. So we have athletic training, and then we also have physical therapy. And so really similar professions, but also very different at the same time. So athletic training is relatively young, which we'll talk about here in a second. But we are a licensed healthcare professional through government. Each state that in the U.S. has their own licensure laws that we have to follow. But we are recognized by the American Medical Association as a healthcare provider. Our profession got started in sports, hence the athletic trainer designation, but really has only really grown recently. Very much have we had to work away from the connotation that we are training. And by that, we are thinking personal training or the strength and conditioning side. When we talk to people, even in the US, we are much more medical based as a profession than we are in the strength and conditioning realm. So we have three kind of strategic partners. So the National Athletic Trainers Association is our national association. The Board of Certification is our overseeing educational body that we have to pass their exam in order to become a certified athletic trainer. And then we have the Commission on Accreditation of Athletic Training Education. And that oversees all our educational programs throughout the country to make sure they are abiding by the standards that are being laid out and ultimately getting prepped to take that certification exam. For the longest time, we had been a bachelor's level program. That is what I graduated from in 2008. The profession is now moved to everything will be a master's level program, and that has to be completed by 2022 with that transition. At my current institution, we are just starting year 2 of our program. And so far, it's been really good in terms of just trying to keep people engaged in the profession. So a little bit more about athletic training. We, as I like to term it, is a jack of all trades profession. We coordinate the medical care in the traditional settings, but we can do many things outside of that. So the traditional setting for us is athletics. Within that, our domains are prevention, clinical evaluation, diagnosis, immediate care, and that includes the emergency care, spine boarding, spinal stabilization, AED, any of those things, exertional heat issues. We also then go treatment to rehab to reconditioning. The organ admin side has become more a part of my life lately with the administrative roles, and then just our general professional responsibility. So really the unique part of our profession is we are there from start to finish, especially in the traditional setting. Now we have grown out from that more so recently, where now you will find athletic trainers working with physicians in their office and doing evaluations. They are in the industrial setting, working at Amazon. They work for the airlines and really just providing care to employees to try and help reduce loss rates. There's a lot of athletic trainers starting to work with local government for utility workers to help them keep them healthy and safe. And so it's really expanded there as well, even into the military and first responder, police, fire, and different things. And actually, one of the things we'll talk about later is actually a program we're designing for our local fire department to help them be better at their job and more injury free. So really, a thing that's changed in our profession in the recent is a kind of a shift from the traditional. Evidence-based practice is a huge thing within our profession, and depending on who you talk to, it can be a huge buzzword with that. I prefer to go with evidence-influenced medicine, or even just the evidence-based paradigm. But really, we're trying to move away from a lot of the old school, in quotes, treatments that maybe are just what we've always done, but aren't necessarily back to the science or the latest on people figuring out more effective ways. So really looking at the movement-based therapy and evaluation, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization out of Prague is something that I found a lot of success with. I work with a colleague who's a chiropractor who is very well versed in that system, and it's been great to just look at a much broader base of options in terms of where problems might be coming from, starting with breath. We're trying to reduce the reliance on passive modalities. It's something that we still use, but to what effect is where we're always trying to figure out how we can get better with it. And then really kind of tying into this talk is I'm working with my sports medicine staff to try and help them understand better the intensity and the volume that is needed to return to sport. And that's something we work a lot with our students, is that all the rehab exercises are great, but if we don't figure out how to load both in intensity and volume, we're not going to be able to get that person back to where they need to be properly, because there's some of the smaller exercises aren't going to do justice for that athlete to get back. Selective soft tissue work in combination with rehab. We do a lot of soft tissue work in our clinic, from cupping to instrument assisted soft tissue mobilization. As was mentioned, I do dry needling as well, plus active release technique and other versions of massage, all of that, but focusing on the ability to then follow it up with rehab in order to make sure that those changes we're trying to make with the tissue work are actually being sustained, and we're helping get somebody to function more optimally, and not just putting a band-aid on the pain they had for any given day. And then bringing in more sports science into what we do down in our sports medicine. We have looked at different training apps to help with force plates, use of isokinetic machines to help judge strength. And so all of that is something that we're really trying to focus on to kind of help optimize the process as it goes, to get our athletes back and to do it in the most efficient way possible. So then what does sports performance have to do with what we're trying to do in the sports medicine realm? This is a unique part of my job. When I first came to my current role, I was only on the sports medicine side. I didn't have anything to do with our strength and conditioning or sports performance. I actually came to this role because I wanted to work with the current head of that the head of that department at the time. They left to pursue another option for a career, and with that, it opened up the opportunity for me to move in and oversee both. That presented a unique opportunity, and one that, as a staff, we said it would be worth it to try and help connect the two programs together. So I talk a lot with our athletes when they come in, and mention that the unique part of my job is from the sports performance end. The goal is to obviously make you a better athlete, but help keep you healthy, so I don't have to see you on the other end of my job, which is the sports medicine side. What we have implemented at UW La Crosse, where I'm currently at, is a system based very much off of Exo Sports Performance. They are based out of Arizona and have facilities and coaches all over the world. I think what they have put together in terms of a system is second to none. With that, we've been able to help bring our athletes who may not be as physically gifted as others to another level because of the system we're able to place them in and help them maximize what their potential is. And then really that's the focus of what we're looking at from the sports performance side, is that we are trying to make a better athlete all around for that athlete to then go and have their sport coach apply those principles of their sport to the athlete that we've helped create. We do break it down somewhat by sport in terms of specificity, but not to such a degree that it is so different that you wouldn't recognize the one program from the next. A little bit more about the strength and conditioning side in the USA. Certification for strength and conditioning is kind of all over the place. There's multiple entities that do it. It is not housed underneath one overarching group such as athletic training is. So there is no national certification exam. There is not a national accreditation for education body for it. So really there's a couple different options you can go. Our ultimate collegiate association has started to try and clamp down on this a little bit due to some high risk activities that had been happening that shouldn't have been happening within collegiate athletics. But the most notable certifications are the NSCA, CSCS. That is what I've gone through. It's a certified strength and conditioning specialist certification. Very good and thorough exam and review of their textbook for the basics of strength and conditioning. Gives you a lot of good solid knowledge plus some other things to help you think about what could potentially grow from there. So it is a good set of base knowledge. There is the Collegiate Strength and Conditioning Coaches Association. They have their own certification. That one I have not done. The USA Weightlifting has a weekend strength and performance coach certification that is very much focused on the Olympic lifts, but often many people in the US will go and get that to help as a variation to a more traditional strength and conditioning model. Like I had mentioned, there's no or less/no regulation, so that can make things a little bit interesting, and you've seen more strength and conditioning programs get put underneath sports medicine to help reduce liability in that regard. So that is ultimately what we have done where I am at. And then there's all kinds of options out there for continuing education and certification. So Exo Sports Performance has their own performance specialist certification. I have gone through that. That is a great outline to their entire system and how to implement it. Highly recommend if that's something that it is all online, so you can go through and do it there. The functional strength training certification, that is by a coach named Mike Boyle, who is also very good. He was with the Exos founder for the early part of his career, so it is very similar in what their methodology is, but also very good. And then there's countless other ones depending on what you're trying to get into, some obviously better than others. So for us, we took a look at our strength and conditioning and really wanted to figure out how to blend them together and really make us get the most out of our strength and conditioning and sports performance sessions. So for me as the athletic trainer coming in and starting to oversee this area, I really wanted to focus on some version of accessory and or corrective exercises, plus also working on some mobility work. And so when I was talking to one of our professors who teaches in our strength and conditioning master's program here, we had a great conversation about, does that need to be its own session? Does it need to be after they get a workout in? Does it have to be after they do a conditioning session? Or is a way that we can blend these things together in order to make it extremely efficient and really maximize the time? Because all of our athletes go through our strength and conditioning programs and our sports performance center. So we have them for at minimum twice a week, if not 3 times a week there. So if there's a way we can build that in, we can really help optimize their time. Most of the time, they won't even realize that they're doing what we're asking them to, and we don't have to spend that extra time creating a secondary program. We can just build it right in. So we really moved away from this quote traditional model of just putting on strength and ignoring a lot of the other things. So off of that exo system, we are very much focused on a movement based system. All of our athletes across all of our sports move in all planes of direction during their workouts. Now that might change from block to block or as the periodization goes, but even our track athletes, our top sprinters are working on lateral movement in order to help just better prepare them for general athleticism, which we're hoping, which we just implemented the last couple of years, it'll actually help reduce some of their more track-based acute injuries and definitely some of the chronic ones. The other thing that we really focus on, I'll have an example of this a little later, is it's not just the strength part. The strength part, from what we kind of consider is a relatively easy portion of it. Most programs will do what you need them to do, but the conditioning is what often gets forgotten. And when we look at conditioning, we try and move away from just long, slow distance or anything, just telling people to go run a bunch of sprints. We are focusing on their ability to jump and land, their agility, their different directions that we need to focus on, and then really looking at what serves the best purpose for quote conditioning. And we've gone more to an energy system development model, very similar off of Exos, to really try and break down what we need to specialize for each sport. And make sure that we're maximizing what they're trying to do. So, as an example, we aren't asking our volleyball players to go run a couple miles of just long, slow distance because it's not going to really have a great impact on what they do. You're setting them up for a potential for some chronic injury or pain that isn't necessary. So, can we move past that to something that's going to help them be better at what they're trying to do? I mean, be in better shape. Moving back to that, just the movement based part, I believe this general line is taken from Gray Cook, the founder of Functional Movement System, is we really don't want to put a bunch of strength on a bad pattern. We're ultimately going to set them up for failure. We're not going to optimize their strength. And so really, we got to figure out what we need to do to get them moving better first, and then put the strength on secondarily. That has been its own unique challenge in that obviously a lot of our athletes want to get in and get big and strong. But once they've bought into the fact that they can move better so they feel better, they go along with it. And we've now had success with it over the past 4 or 5 years. So just having the older athletes be able to convince the younger athletes that they are going to get what they want out of the program has been huge. Another one we talk about is, at what point is strong enough? And this is one that we take a look at for specifically our male sports, especially American football. We look at having a squat max that is 2 times body weight and a bench press max that is 1.5 times body weight is just a general marker of strength. As we're getting into those realms, we're really not too concerned about increasing strength significantly anymore. Just the risk versus reward ratio, as I will talk about here, is just too great. So if we can now add more speed to them and more explosiveness, we're going to really increase their power and go from there. My apologies. I forgot when I updated this and sent this out. I needed to upgrade. Give me 1 second, please. Just finishing this up. My apologies on that. All right. I think that should be good. I hope that it doesn't boot me off there, but potentially will. You'll have to let me know what you'd like me to do on that, but I will continue until that happens. The risk versus reward. We really look at Olympic movements versus the different pull variations. We don't do a lot of true Olympic lifting movements just because of the concern of risk of injury on the catch of a power clean or getting a snatch up above the head for somebody that maybe isn't quite strong enough to do it. And so we really looked at different pull variations. And actually, one of the professors we work with has shown that with different low pull, whether from a clean grip or a snatch grip, really can allow people to still generate just as much, if not more, power when it comes to getting through that movement. And that's ultimately going to save us from getting injured, which is going to not reduce time that it's going to take in order to recover in terms of trying to get them ready to go. So that is something that we've really tried to pay attention to in that regard to make sure that we are not causing more injury than we're doing. And that also looks at maxing out. We don't max out in terms of the traditional 1 rep max, because we're really going to set them up for failure when it comes to that. And that is something that can be bad. And we obviously don't want, where we look at a 3 rep max, or in most cases, a 5 rep max, in order to make sure that we are not, again, setting them up to fall apart on a 1 rep max. And we're getting a better representation of their strength when we do a 5 RM. So one thing is that we talk about in our sports performance center is a good training program is your prevention program. There's a time and a place for specialized programs, but in most cases, they aren't necessarily needed, especially I've found with younger and developing athletes. So really, a solid strength and conditioning or sports performance program really should satisfy the needs of a prevention program. So when we talk about the conditioning program we do and the conditioning class, and also just our strength and conditioning in the sports performance center, we really are looking at ACL prevention. We really are focusing on shoulder health. We're looking at core development. We're looking at all these things that we can do in order to make sure that we're building that right in, and it now doesn't become an extra session. And so really that's been something that's been really beneficial, and we've seen a reduction in injuries because of doing that. So again, really, if we focus on making our sports performance programming as exceptional as they can be, we're getting an exponential return because people are going to be healthier in the process, and that is ultimately going to reduce injury time. They may be more resilient when it comes to injury, but it is also definitely going to help with the performance side of it. And so that is something we've really paid attention to. So in the overview, I talked about this Bridging the Gap. This book by Sue Falsoni, it's fantastic. Highly recommend it. Sue Falsoni is a PT, ATC, plus a certified strength and conditioning coach. She was the first woman athletic trainer in Major League Baseball, worked with the Dodgers, worked at Exo Sports Performance for quite some time, and so really has done a great job in the realm of sports. She does a good job in this book breaking down kind of the medical side. So it's great for a sports performance person to read, to just generally understand what a physio or an athletic trainer is doing. Then she talks about the performance side of it, and that is great for someone who might not be as well versed, that is an athletic trainer or a physio, and looking at that. And she really does a big part in moving past some of the traditional things and highlighting more of the processes and things that can be done in order to help exponentially move a person along in their injury. This figure that I have here is directly from her, and just the kind of paradigm she follows in terms of the treatment of her athletes, and who she works with. So that is something we are slowly trying to build in, and just making sure we're not overlooking anything as we work through this process, and we move them back into this performance enhancement aspect after we get through the pain management portion of it. So some of this bridging the gap consideration is, understanding what both professions bring to the table. And that's ultimately why I wanted to give more of a background on that, because there is a lot of overlap while they're both bring unique things. One thing that I have found in my career is that there is enough injured people to go around. There's enough people to train to go around. We don't need to necessarily pigeonhole ourselves into just doing one thing. That being said, really setting up and having good communication is going to be important. And that's where we've been very fortunate. We'll talk about a case study here in just a minute, of where I'm at currently, and how that speaking of the same language and utilizing the same verbiage is really important with that. And I don't believe my upgrade worked. And so I think we may have to click back into the link here, if how would be you guys would like to best go about that. And again, I apologize for the technical difficulties with this one. Is there any specific way you guys would like to deal with it's signing us off here in a second? I'll just keep going until it does that. We can figure it out. So, really looking at the communication, instead of me being able to tell someone that you need to not do these specific movements, like any version of a bench press, single arm, alternating, dumbbell, barbell, whatever it is, I can basically just talk to our sports performance coach and say they can do this through a horizontal upper extremity press, but nothing vertical. So nothing going overhead. So then within their realm of knowledge and the exercises that they have planned, they can adjust on the fly, knowing exactly what the guidance is from me. And we don't have to have a significant long talk about what we're going to do, and make sure that it's super specific, which can ultimately lead to some confusion. So we try and be very
Yeah, you can start now.
I can start again?
Yeah. It is so
Okay.
showing. Yeah. Start.
So apologies about that. So looking at going on to coaching cues and the consistency with it. So again, we've really focused on in terms of our talking, and this is another book that I have not got yet, but it's on my list. Nick Winkelman, he is now the head of sports performance and training and science with Irish Rugby, has a book called The Language of Coaching. He actually did his PhD looking at internal versus external cueing and the importance of doing external cueing. That is something that we have really tried to focus on. And as an example, talking about spreading the floor when we're trying to create tension through the hips, or if we're coming out of a sprint, taking off like a jet plane, so staying low and then eventually coming up, instead of saying contract your glutes. And so a lot of those things in terms of driving your heels into the ground to get more glute activation for a hip bridge or something like that is ultimately the one that we're really trying to create a shift with our staff to focus on those things to try and get better results from our athletes. Part of in the bridging the gap, Sue Falsoni mentions being a bad input equals bad output, and that is not only for looking at what our athletes are doing physically, but also what we're giving them verbally. I think that starts making a really good coach and clinician, where if you're not getting the response you're looking for from your athlete, that you can have enough options in your arsenal to communicate with them and how they are going to be able to respond and thus have success when it comes to whatever movement or activity that they're doing. Sports science. This is something that we're slowly bringing more into what we do. We do a lot of nutritional testing, and for us, that's more informational, really, than it is anything. For us, working with university level athletes, the budget does not exist on our end to help them in terms of food or anything like that. And with them being at university, most of them are working jobs in the summer to help pay for the year, or mom and dad are still helping them out. And so really we try and educate them on the amount of calories they need, and then try and work on the quality of those calories. We found a lot of our athletes had been underperforming because they were under fueling. They just weren't consuming enough calories to keep up with the demands they were trying to put their body through. We did this with our American football players years ago, and a guy that could never put on weight realized that he was burning 3,000 calories at rest through some metabolic testing. So we figured he probably, in a busy week and everything, is burning upwards of 6,000 calories a day between practice and lifting. Well, once he finally realized that and realized he was not eating close to that, once the consumption went up, so did the results. And it was fairly quick and really noticeable. So that was a fantastic example there. Movement screening, we'll talk a little bit about what we utilize currently, but that is something we do utilize. I know there's a lot of mixed feelings on movement screening. We look at using it in terms of having a baseline of something to address. Oftentimes it's confirming what we already are seeing, but now we have something tangible to excuse me, to go by and take a look at when it comes to their movement. Do a lot of video based stuff, especially in rehab, along with potentials of using force plates and different modalities there to help our athletes see what they are actually doing and what we're trying to do, and accomplish in that rehab session. One other area that we've started increasing a little bit more is training monitoring. We utilize a couple different systems. Polar Pro we have utilized, looking at GPS data, heart rate, and just getting some baseline measures. We've only done it for a year, so we really don't have a ton of data to go off of yet. But with our American football team, we used a Zephyr system, and we've utilized that for 4 or 5 years. and that actually influenced our practice plan, where we've now changed how we practice during the week to help get our athletes fresh for their weekend competition, where we'll have Sunday off. Monday will be a moderate intensity day. Tuesday is their heaviest day. Wednesday is a glorified walkthrough for them, so very low level. Thursday is kind of a mixture between Monday and Tuesday in terms of intensity, and then Friday is very short but intense, trying to get everything firing, get their bodies tuned up to get ready for their competition on Saturday. And we've had some really good success with injuries by utilizing that, and also just in their performance. So, sorry, this slide didn't get quite finished, but just a quick case study at UW La Crosse within our sports medicine and sports performance. So really what we do is combine both entities together to really help out. And so, as I had mentioned, we utilize the functional movement screen for our movement testing. It does give us a good baseline. We're fortunate enough that we've got upwards of 9 or 10 FMS kits, and when we have a full staff and our students, we train them in how to go through this and make sure that they understand what they're doing. And so we can run through 15 athletes in no time at all when we set up stations, or 150 athletes, like with our football program, where they each will go through the station. We have a different clinician there judging and giving the instructions. From what we've seen in the data, the reliability between testers is fairly good. Fairly simple test to administer. If you haven't had exposure to it, it is 7 movements. They are working on adding another, I believe. We have someone on staff who is our go-to person for this, but it's scored on a 0 to 3 scale, where 0 is if they have any pain. It is a 0. A 3 is the perfect movement, and you read some pre-scripted instructions on what that looks like. 2 is efficient with some variation, and 1 is no pain, but the movement was not efficient at all. So that's what we utilize. It gives us a lot of data points very quickly, to which we then can go through and break it down and look at team by team. So this is just a general quick breakdown, and I'm sorry if it's small. I tried to incorporate as much on there as I could. So what we'll do is actually list it all out in an Excel sheet. And then we'll go, and in the upper left, we get highlighted any drastic left to right asymmetries. Those are something, when we take a look at those, we'll actually try and follow up with from the sports medicine side, and really take a look at why they have those deficiencies. So if you subscribe to the functional movement system model, you would start potentially with the FMS, and then if some of these glaring deficiencies came up, you would look at the SFMA, or the selective functional movement assessment, which is a much more targeted assessment when it comes to looking at what is really the root cause of the error. We have not gone that far yet, but it is definitely something we're looking into. So beyond that, from the sports performance side, we're looking for trends. And so the figure down in the bottom left is a breakdown of the team. In this case, it is our entire football team. So I believe we did 150 or so athletes. The upper left is only just a snippet of that. But that is the breakdown of the symmetries or the asymmetries that we have, things we need to focus on. And we can really take a look at the numbers to know the percentage. And that's ultimately what we look at when it comes to the graph on the right side. So through Exos and their sports performance certification, they have a hierarchy of what of these movements you're going to go and address first. I believe this came straight out of the FMS, but we look at an active straight leg first. So really the importance of addressing starts from the top left, goes across to the push-up, which is the TPSU, and then drops down to the inline lunge, the hurdle step over, and the deep squat, with the deep squat being the last thing you're supposed to really fully address, specifically because I believe their hopes are, if you're addressing the active straight leg raise, so a lot of hamstring issues, your shoulder mobility, and your rotary stability, you're going to go and correct a lot of those things along the way and ultimately end up with better scores. And so that's what we're looking at from a sports performance standpoint, is what are the trends we're seeing from team to team? Does it get better from year to year? And then how can we go and potentially address those and still make it feasible for the student athlete to get it all done? And so that ultimately leads us to our programming. And this is really the change that happened 4 years ago that helped us make a huge difference in our injury. So we didn't officially run a study, but we were just looking back through the injury data. We had a changeover in coaching staff. So from the previous coaching staff, intense practices, very traditional strength and conditioning mindset. They moved on to a different opportunity. So we came in the next year, basically had a full year of training under our new training style, focusing on the movement, a new coaching staff, still very intense, very high speed practices. And when we went back and looked at the soft tissue injury data, we decreased our hip flexor, hamstring, kind of adductor injuries by at least 50%, if not higher, from year to year. And that was with about a year long of training implementation and not too much changeover in the athletes. So for that's a huge number in terms of keeping people healthy, especially with hamstring injuries and hip flexors, which don't always respond how you want them to get them back quickly. And so really going back to before our technical issues, when I had mentioned from my athletic training side, I wanted to see some corrective or accessory exercises, plus some mobility built in to programs, or figure out how we would do that on another day or another session. This is what ultimately came about, is this type of training template. So if you're looking at it where you would start this is all would all be in line in one big column, but due to the size of the slide, I had to break it up. So we'd be starting on the left side, and eventually moving our way to the right. And so when you start going down in that kind of light blue area, what the pillar and movement prep is our version of a warm-up. We don't use warm-up anymore. We try and kind of dispel that, and we don't want it to be I'm going to go jog for 5 minutes and do some basic static stretching and I'm good. So these are accessory exercises that we look to build in, along with a little bit of cardiovascular kind of nervous system prep as well. But we start with the pillar prep. Pillar we're looking at is in essence the core, shoulders through the abdominal area, through the hips, getting everything warmed up, moving, and loose. And then we move on to the movement prep, which is just more movement with some more key areas that we're trying to focus on getting major joints warmed up and everybody moving properly before we go into the SPC, or the Sports Performance Center, to start our lift. And so this is where, along with kind of moving into the program, we started building in some of the extra exercises that we were seeing that were an issue from our FMS scores. And so as you read this template, this one, we color coded this actually for a different purpose, but it works out really well for this presentation, is we do everything in superset. So we lift in groups of 4 to 5 on a platform that has a power block set of dumbbells there. So basically everything you need is right at that platform, so you never have to leave. So everybody starts with the red block. So the main movement is the calf locks version, listed on all the different ones, right in the center at the top. So they will do that movement. In the case of the red, we start off with total body power, or the total body movement. For this specific program, we're just working on getting total body involvement. So we do a banded overhead squat. After they finish that, they go into this quadruped rocking mobility exercise, and then work through if you're working at week 1, go through the first set of 8, go back and repeat, go through the second set, and ultimately go through 3. Once everybody in that group's finished that block, they then move down to the orange. So again, the main movement being in the center there, in all capitals. So they would do their dumbbell bench press alternating, then they go into a half kneeling hip flexor stretch, drop down, do a rotational squat, one armed, and then do the pec deck stretch or just a shoulder pec stretch. So everybody would go through that and then ultimately circle back up to the top to go through their second superset. Really, it allows for a lot of efficiency for us and just everybody to keep moving. So if you're in a group of 4, somebody starts with the bench press alternating, moves on to the half kneeling hip flexor, and then the second person starts with the dumbbell bench press. So really, everybody's constantly moving. They're going through their built-in rest periods with the low-level accessory exercises or the mobility exercises. And really, again, that's where we are able to build in what we're seeing both from just general movement and what we know probably needs to happen, and also what we've seen from those FMS results. And really, that has been the takeaway, where now we have had athletes leaving even an intense strength and conditioning session saying how much better they feel when they leave than when they went in, because we built in these mobility exercises that maybe weren't there before. And we've also eliminated any standing around, so it is very focused and intense as it needs to be session when it comes to that. So then we also built in a rotational block. That's something that was very different with this style of programming, is everybody focusing on some sort of rotational or anti-rotational movement. And then the auxiliary block at the end, we still build in some of the things we want to see and do in there, but it is also a block for us to help build in even some of the fun or vanity type exercises, especially for some of our male sport athletes that still are in university and want to show off a little bit. So we still build some of those things in for them in order to help make sure that we're also getting the buy-in when it comes to that, because if you don't have that, then it's really not going to be worth a whole lot. And then this is just a specific example in the green at the bottom is the energy system development. We don't necessarily build that into each program with our athletes at university. This program is actually for our local fire department that we're working with. So we're trying to focus on just building more robust athletes out of our firefighters, plus helping with some preventative things with their shoulders and their hips, and then also getting them just in general better shape. So that is where our ESD comes in for this specific example of a template. So in addition to that, and this comes back to the conditioning aspect of it all, is we run these conditioning classes, which is basically just conditioning sessions. For how it works with our football program, which is what I work closest with, so that's why I keep using them as an example, but we do the same thing with soccer, our basketball programs, a similar version with our volleyball programs, but they're generally about 7 weeks of training. And this is in coordination and structured with what they are doing in their actual strength and condition, their strength program. So they are complementary in what we're trying to get done. The nice thing that has worked out well for us, so again, with our American football season being in the fall, if somebody were to have a significant injury or potentially had to get a surgical repair, this program usually starts in January. So if, depending on when that injury happens, and really me working with them to get them through those initial phases of rehab, once we get started at the end of January and the first part of February, I can turn over this athlete in most cases to this program because I know how it's structured. I know what they're doing. I can write in any modifications, but because we're trying to teach our athletes to move better and generally just become better athletes, I don't necessarily have to run them through a whole recovery protocol. We can focus on other things in their rehab sessions, specific strength, other areas that we want to focus on, because I know they're getting this structure within their sports performance program. And so for a lot of our ACL repairs, it has been the perfect transition to get them ready for the end of the spring, where things start getting more intense and they can get back and do some spring football. So really combining this type of class with their strength program, it saved me so much time because I know they're getting things taken care of and they're doing it correctly, that's all attributed to the collaboration between myself and our sports performance coach. And so really on these conditioning classes, we're focusing on the basics, jumping and landing mechanics. We start double leg and work to single leg, running mechanics. Doesn't matter if you're a offensive lineman or a wide receiver when it comes to football. You are working on the same things. We're trying to, again, make you a more robust athlete. We work on linear and multi-directional speed. We do a lot of medicine ball work here, both for just general power, but also for rotation. We do a lot with that. And then ultimately the energy system development at the end of the program. So this is going to probably be very small, which I apologize for, but this is just an example of it. So this is a week early on in the semester for us. As across the bottom, this was a strength block for our strength program. So we were lifting 4 days a week with the different focuses of the upper body pull and the lower body push. That is one thing that kind of bypass. We really like to focus on doing the opposite, training the whole body in any kind of session. So for a 4-day block, we'll just kind of mimic those and repeat. If we have a 3-day, we'll do an upper body pull, lower body push, upper body push, lower body pull, and then their 3rd day will be a full total body. So we're hitting all those major movements when it comes to that. But if you look at Tuesday, you can see it's a linear day. So still the general warm up, which I know we say we try and get away from, but we don't hand this out so they don't know what it actually says that. It is basically pillar and movement prep, like I had mentioned again, to get that warm up, get the heart rate up, get the nervous system primed, and go from there. And then on that specific day, we were working on plyos, a drop squat. That is literally the first thing we start working on to land on one foot where you're not really leaving the ground. So before we get to anything beyond that, we're working on those mechanics. We got hurdle jumps in there, working on some bounding. We have the med balls written in. This again being more of a linear day. We're doing a chest throw and an overhead throw, and then the movements skill. So we were in the early parts of working on running techniques. So doing wall drills for acceleration and doing holds and then doing marching. And then that'll eventually evolve into kind of going rapid fire with the wall drill singles. And then that evolves into doubles and even beyond. And then when that on the baseline, we were working on straight leg skips and straight leg run, just trying to get a little bit of conditioning in there, but not necessarily super focused. And that evolves as well into more timed runs for specific distances, typically not going over 15 seconds, and very rarely, especially this early on, going at top speed. So then Thursday, without walking all the way through it, is a lateral day. Very similar concept. We're just focusing on our lateral and multi-directional movement. So kind of in summary with this, on this interprofessional collaboration, it's all the people that you work with, and I've been fortunate with that. But really, there's a huge value in it, and so getting with people that have skill sets that you don't is a good thing, I think. And it's not to say that it's not good for you to be at least aware of what they're doing, but there's too much for all of us to be experts at all of it. That's the fun thing about, I think, our profession, both on the sports medicine, the physiotherapy side, and the sports performance side, is that you can never know it all. So you can always be learning, but at the same time, you're never going to be able to be an expert on all things. It's too big to keep up with. But sports performance people have skill sets that ATCs don't, vice versa. It's good for an athletic trainer to have familiarity around the training and programming, but that should be the sports performance coach's area of expertise. They specialize in the ability to develop power, agility, and athleticism. So if you can get your athlete to a specific point, it is perfect to be able to hand them off to that sports performance coach in order to allow them to take advantage and take them to the next level. Different perspectives on injury. Our sports performance coach and I talk all the time about any injury trends that we're seeing. Why is that? He's usually concerned that it's because of the programming, which I assure him most of the time that has nothing to do with it. But it helps with prevention ideas. We can look at confounding factors about what people might be going through. And then just to kind of summarize a little bit more on the professional collaboration, it took me a while to figure out how to check my own ego, but I am glad I did because it has opened up so many more opportunities. Going all the way back to the DNS, I've gone through 2 courses, so I'm just dangerous enough to get somebody started on the stuff. But if it's something that's beyond that, I know I've got a colleague in the area that does it on a daily basis as part of his practice. So I'll turn it over to them because they're going to get such a better result than me trying to continue to come up with it when I can just refer to them. Knowing our roles and maximizing it, huge in that. When you've got people that are specialists all across the board and you complement each other, it just makes for a better program. And that's something we're focusing on currently within our many hands make light work. Pretty self-explanatory. And then we always try and remember across all the board, like, this goes back to checking our ego, is what are we ultimately there for? We're there for the athlete to achieve what they want to achieve. We're to help them get there, and we're going to support them. And if we lose sight of that, that is an issue. And so that is something that we come back to over and over again about what the ultimate goal is. So that about sums up everything I have. Here is just some general things if you want to get in contact with me. All my personal stuff is on the left. The 2 podcasts are in the middle and on the right there. We're all over the place, so don't hesitate to reach out through any of those mediums. I hope that this was something that you guys took away from. I think it's something that once we even see here, some eyes start lighting up and dots start being connected with our students and even our younger staff about not going at this alone and the importance of developing these relationships and really working together. But I will stop rambling now. And if there are questions or discussion, I will stop sharing so I can see if they get popped up either in the chat or I believe somebody also might be mediating some of those questions. So if there have any, please feel free to ask. If not, feel free to send them to me and we'll go from there.
Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us and sharing your knowledge with us. It was really a wonderful session, and we also get something new to learn today. So now we are moving towards the question answer session. So, sir, our first question is how brain mapping helps in returns to regular athletic training after an injury?
Did you say what was the part? Brain mapping?
Yes, sir.
That might be a realm that I'm not as well versed in. If we're looking at just trying to get back and get them moving and looking at the neurologic side of it, we haven't done anything with going and actually looking at their brain and trying to figure out how that helps them get to move. As many fancy things as we do, we aren't that fancy. And so we're trying to see what we can get, and knowing what we're trying to accomplish with all the movements we are doing. And if there's something that seemingly isn't working, we'll go back and take a look through the nervous system and try and do that. But thankfully, with our athletic population, we typically don't have any major issues with any neuromuscular connections or anything along those lines. So I'm sorry that probably wasn't as satisfactory of an answer as it could have been.
Okay. So now our next question is how much time it will take for the person with sports injury to strengthen them in a strengthening program?
It depends where you're starting from. So the first probably 4 to 6, potentially up to 8 weeks, if they are starting very new to strength and conditioning, you're going to get some really big strength gains fairly quickly if they are putting in the effort. And a lot of that is the neuromuscular adaptation to it. So it's not so much that you are getting the hypertrophy within the muscles. You probably will be getting a little bit, but those changes from the neuromuscular system can happen really pretty quickly. And then from there, you'll start seeing more of the actual changes to the muscular system. And really, for us, depending on the sport, but we've seen with our athletes that even if they worked out a lot in their high school setting, we alternate between a hypertrophy and a strength block pretty regularly in the off season to make sure that that is what we're focusing on, and we don't get too advanced in working on some explosion and power. We try and build that in. But if they are starting out really new, that first 4 to 8 weeks you're gonna see quite a bit of improvement when it comes to that, and it'll directly transfer.
Okay, sir. So thank you all the attendee for being here and listen to the speaker patiently. And I would also like to thank PwC for organizing such wonderful webinar, and we will also expect more webinar from your side in future too. Thank you, Physio Webinar Club, for giving me the chance to be a part of this webinar and to moderate the session. Before winding up the session, we would like to express our heartful thanks to Sir for accepting our invitation and taking out some precious time for us for the webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a nice time and happy learning.
Thank you.